You guys asked for it. Here it is. I know you've been waiting for it. Here is the video that I'm doing on Seashack, which is right here. The wood walls, the old wooden shack. So get ready and stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, let's get started with part 2, the wood shack of this coastal scene that we're going to be painting each one of these parts. And right now, this is Seashack. This is the coastal scene that we're painting. And the part that we're actually going to be doing today is a blow up of this area right here. Okay, let's get started. And if you look down at this is a blow up of that area I just showed you. And this is a painting, just a little snippet of what that is going to be, and that's the one that I did paint just earlier today to give you an idea what you'll be looking at. This video is going to cover the area of the shack, and our next video is going to be painting that old crusty rusted roof. Okay, so let's get started with this, and I'll show you what I have done already in order to give you an opportunity to see where I can go. I painted this board, and this board, and I really should make it a little bit darker. And what I'm using here is a mixture of cobalt blue with a little bit of raw umber here. You can also use your burnt umber, or as I use, transparent brown oxide. There we go. And this will give you a little bit of a head start. I'm just putting in another color. I'm going to mix it a little more blue with it, and this is going to be similar to that. Okay, now I'll just come over this whole thing. Now I have those boards that I've alternated. Okay, let me go back in, and I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. Now I'm going to come in between these two boards that I've already put down on paper, and I'm going to show you what happens when they touch. I'm going to go across, and where they touch, right through here, look at this line that's formed right here and right here. And that's because the paint has overlaid itself. Well, I'll come in and I'll dab a little bit of it so that I can get a little harmony and value of these boards. This was one of the others I painted early, but I think I'm going to go over it in a minute. But here we go again. This happens to be between these two boards. I dab it down a little bit, but you can easily see what has happened right here and right here. It's created an automatic line. There are no pencil lines here. Okay, let's take a wider brush, and we'll do the same thing with a little bit wider brush, like this 1-inch brush. Okay, get some pigment. 1-inch brush, we'll get a little bit wider line right through here, varying the size of the boards. All right, let's come down here. Need a little bit more pigment. And I like mixing the pigment for this as I paint rather than mixing a whole pile, because I can get some a little darker, some a little lighter. I don't want them to be all the constant same value. Just mix in a little bit of these 3 colors I mentioned earlier, and we're fine. Okay, now let's go back to that 1/2-inch thick brush and get some more of this. I'm going to come back in here, and this is basically all I do. Besides texturize it, but that comes after. Okay, put that board in. Now you can see the pattern of what's starting to happen. We're starting to get all these boards that are creating these lines between each other and making it look like we drew a pencil line to establish where the boards are set up against each other. Well, this is a pretty easy way of doing it. I'm just going to come straight down, and I'm hoping this is dark enough for you to see. Again, I'm going a little bit darker than I normally would because I don't want to get too many dark boards. Okay, that's the next one. We're going to skip one, and we're going to go to the next one right here. Then we would skip the width of another one. Then we would go in with another board right there. And let's just say it's a wide board and it's going to cover all the way down to here. Right on the side of the frame of that opening. Okay, so now you can see we've put these in next to each other. We started again. This was a vacant board area. We went and we painted in with the vertical line just every other board. So we've got to come back once these first ones we painted dry a little bit and put in with the second. Well, let's just go ahead and do it. I don't think we should have any real issue here. All right. And I'm just going to bring this one on the side of that one. There we go again. You're starting to see a separation. It's going to happen right in here. All right, let's go to the next board. Right here. Does it make any difference if you have this little white spot? See these little streaks where the paint didn't cover? You can see several of them. Nah, leave it alone. You always come back in and darken those. Let's go back, and we're going to paint this one in adjacent to one we've already painted. There it is. So now you've gotten your base down for the boards, and this is a time when you've got to let them dry. I mean, there's no question about that. So while we're waiting for those to dry, let's mix up a little bit a dark color. I'm not going to call it black, just going to call it dark. That's why you see that ultramarine blue right here. And what we're going to mix up is ultramarine blue, and this time we're going to use a little burnt sienna. It's a little bit of a warmer dark, and I'm going to tell you it's pretty dark. I'm going to add just a little bit more blue in there. Clean my brush first before I go in and pick up some more blue. And now look at this color adjacent to this one. Can you see the difference in those two? Much deeper. It's got more blue in this one. This has more of the burnt sienna, or actually in my case, red iron oxide. Transparent red iron oxide. Okay? So we've got that dark mixed. I'm going to take that dark, make sure it's pretty fluid, and I'm going to use my 1/2 inch flat brush. And here's where you want to be careful, because we want to one stroke the windows. All right? One window, another, I should say window pane, another window pane, maybe a little further down. Here comes another one. Okay, so far that's the window panes. There's one, a little bit more pigment. Here comes the last one on this side. Does it make any difference if they're not all identical? Well, no, that's the whole purpose of doing these old rustic kinds of buildings and old shacks and everything that goes with those old rustic old places. Now that has to dry, obviously, but if you want to give that texture a little difference, you just take the other tool that you have, your paper towel, and just kind of dab a few little areas. You can see how it created differences in the value of the paint. That's what you're really looking for right there. Now let's go inside this little bitty building. There it is. It's going to be dark inside, and only light coming in is basically through this window and some through that window. So what are we going to do? Same thing. I'm going to make a little bit wider wood panels though, and I'm going to take that dark we painted the windows, and I'm going to create the panels with this brush. A little bit of a texture create, that's fine. And I'm bringing it right down over this little piling out in the front. And I've been asked to go in and dab just a hair. I've been asked quite a bit about how I paint these pilings. If we have enough time with this particular video, I will show you how I get that done. So we did this the same as we did the outside wall. I skipped, or alternated, I should say, a space, and I'm going to go in and make that space a little bit narrower. Now I'm rushing the brush just a hair. Don't like to do that, but for the sake of time, I'm going to get the same kind of, saw that right there? Right here. Right there. That's where the two paints mixed over, and that's what you get. You get that little dark line, and then there's going to be another. I'm using part of this brush. Just get you a smaller flat brush and let that smaller flat brush be what you need for that. Now, I purposely did these one little lighter than the other so you could see the basic differences of how alternated board to board. So let's go in and let's just put the color in that should be there. Okay, that's going to all darken pretty close to the same. So now we have that area inside. You're looking through the windows out here. And let me show you what I like doing with those particular windows. This is a little bit transparent brown iron oxide or burn umber. And what I'll do is I'll make sure this is not too wet. I'll come in at this point. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go in just a hair more so you can see clearly the separations between the glass panes. I'm not being extremely careful because I want it to be rustic. Okay, dab it down a little bit so that you don't get such a difference in darkness between the two. I'm going to use my flat brush, and all I'm doing is cutting across the vertical. Get a little bit off of there again. And basically you get the same thing with a few of them on this side. Okay, so there we go. We'll let that kind of dry off. Now what we can do, and I'm only going to do a portion of this one, is go in and use a shadow line so that these rafters that are exposed are going to show. And that's all done with shade and shadows. For the sake of time, again, I'm going to use some neutral tint and let that mix with the burnt sienna, or umber, or the raw umber, or of course the brown oxide that I use. All right, I'm going to get a little bit bigger brush. I'm actually going to use this 1/2 inch flat brush for this. Let me zoom out just a hair again. Okay, to that particular piece. And just to give you an idea, we come in with this brush, and I put it at an angle like it's the actual corner of that piece. Just sculpt around where these rafters are supposed to be hitting. Come across and pick up these areas right next to the wood. Okay, and just keep going across with that same technique. And the reason why I use that same technique as the vertical is because it also helps in looking at it to show that there are different panels, or I should say different boards more than panels, because it gives you that same vertical look. We're going to come back over it when we want to texture it. Okay, so let's just keep going, and you just keep going all the way down the line until you get to where you know you've got the end and you've got it done. And at the same time, we're going to come in and we're going to get a little shadow line right under this window. And of course the light's coming this way. You can tell by the direction here. It's coming down in this capacity. You see the dark on this side of those piling. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little dark right down through here. Now I am using the point of this flat brush, and I'm just moving it a little this way, just almost not like a scumble, but in order to get enough of a difference in it so that it's got a little variety in it, not just all looking the same. You just don't want that. You don't want everything to look the same. These are old shacks and they're not the same at all, not any place in there. Okay, here we go. I'm going to take my same mixture that I use for that shadow line, and I'm going to come down. This time I'm not going to paint over the piling, and I'm just going to bring it inside. Just a few little simple strokes. I'm going to cover over the edge of that frame, and again I'm going vertically. And there we are. Dry my brush off after I've cleaned it and pick up some of this dark that was down here. Okay, so now that shows you the difference between light hitting here and inside the building. And by the way, I surely didn't finish this particular part, which is, these are those center little mullion pieces that separate the window. Now on the outside edge, which is going to be the frame for that opening, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm using my brown oxide, and I'm just going to make a nice width to it so that the frame stands out. Should the frame be exactly the same everywhere? No, you don't want that. You want it to look a little more beaten. So just vary it a little bit. And that's basically how you get this done. By the way, you can take and turn your paper if you wish and make it a little easier on yourself, depending upon how you paint. And I paint in this kind of fashion. Okay, and then come back in and kind of get a little variation by dabbing it with your paper towel. Just to give you an idea up close. Can you see what happened there? I didn't really remove any paint, and that's in this frame section. Just a dab here that gives it that older look. All right, so that's pretty much how it's done. You can come back in at any moment after it's all dry, and you can go in and texturize some of these boards. Now instead of doing it on here, I'm going to take another piece of paper and show you what I mean by texturizing these boards. Let's assume that this is the board we just painted. And see that? Okay, it should be. I don't want to make it too dark, because I want to give myself the opportunity of texturing this old weathered rustic wood board without it getting too dark. And I'm going to split open a little bit wider here. Now you see these misses? See where the paint has skipped? That needs to be a little bit darker. It's a shame, just too much light or not enough light. Huh? Okay, so now I've got which looks like one board, a skipped, one board, same thing, a skipped, the same as we did just a few minutes ago. I'm going to let that kind of dry up a little bit. I'm going to hurry it along by just hitting it with my paper towel. And what I mean by texturing is, here it comes. You can do one of two brushes. I have my round. This is a 6 or number 8 round is fine, depending upon the scale. And what I mean by scale is this. This is painted at one scale. This is painted at a different scale. Obviously much smaller. So the width of these boards is a lot thinner than the width of these boards. Now, you can't get much detail when you're this small. You can here. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're planning what you're going to want to paint. Well, I'm going to take now this piece. Where did I put it? Oh, it's right here. This should be dry enough to where I can come back in over it, and I'm going to use a much darker color. I have my neutral tint that was mixed up with those colors, and I'm going to add a little bit cobalt blue to this and give it this appearance right here. See that kind of grayish look? Maybe a little bit darker so that you can see it over that light gray background, grayish brown background. All right, add a little bit more of this. No more water, just pigment. A little bit more pigment there just to make it a little darker. Now, I'm going to use the bottom of the brush right through here. I'm not going to use the paint unless I skip a spot where I want more, and I'll show you how to do it. I'm also going to want to start right here on this particular line of this board. So I'm putting my brush to where the point is on this end so I can see what's happening under it. Here we go. Just kind of fast. Just get yourself a good stroke coming down. Turn it around, and you can do it flat as well. And do the same thing. I want to get as close to this edge of that board, so I'm going to put my point towards that area and skim it on down. Now, am I happy with that? I don't know. I'm going to, with the paper towel, kind of lighten and darken these areas. And again, this is what you wind up with. See all that texture? You get that wood texture. Well, let's just rule, and let's keep doing this particular one, and then we'll come back to this one. So I'm going to take and turn my sheet, and why I'm doing that, I'm more comfortable painting in this fashion than I am trying to go up. I mean, just the way you paint, just make it comfortable on yourself. There's some. Now I can go to the edge of here because I can see the point and I can see the edge. If I try to paint this edge, I'm gonna come out of the line there. Let me get some of this off and you'll see where I'm going. Boom, I'm gonna turn it around one more time. And now I can see where that edge is, and I can control not painting outside the edge of that board. Then I'm just going through here and giving it a little texture. And I'm going to dab it out again with my paper towel. Now, I'm going to take some of my raw umber and I'm going to mix it, and a pretty good bit of it, into that same mix that I had just a while ago. Take the excess moisture out. I'm going to go back to this first piece we painted. I'll try to do it this way. See what's happening? Now I'm going to actually sculpt it to where I want it to show what I want it to show. How much texturing is necessary? That's a really good question. How much do you want? What does your eye tell you? Again, this is your painting. You can make it what you want. And if you want a heavy textured piece, then that's probably where I am at this point. With a little heavy texture. Maybe a little bit heavier than I actually would like to have it. Who knows? That depends on what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to tab that down just a hair. Now what we have is this. Okay, now we got this texture. It looks all alone just being by itself, but when you start combining these, you're going to get one heck of a lot of difference in the look of this. So let's go back in. I'm going to dilute this down just a little bit so I can get, oh, where's my bigger brush? Here it is. Another board right in the middle of it. Okay, so now, again, I'm a little darker than I normally would want to put, but that's okay. So now I've got 3 boards in a row, and a reason why I waited on putting this one, obviously, is because of that. And once it dries, you do the same exact thing as we did before. You come in, now what I'm going to do is use a flat brush to put the texture in. Make sure it's not too much pigment on your brush. Use the side of your brush, and it's still a little wet. The base is still a little wet, but it works. I'm going to get a little darker pigment just to illustrate to you. And now you can design in what you think you'd like to have. I'm going to dry that off a little bit because I didn't wait long enough for the base coat. And I'm glad I'm showing it just like that, because you really need to not rush the brush. You got to take your time in doing some of this. Otherwise, everything's going to pull itself together and you're just not going to have what you're looking for. So you got to just take your time a little bit more when you do these. I'm making this much darker, kind of dabbing it out a little bit, and now you can see some of the texture you get. Okay, this is with a flat brush. I'm going to turn it around, get some of the moisture off, just tap it. See what happens? See all of these skips where it lets the lighter color show through? That's what you're looking for. Now let's show you what that looks like. There's texture. And you can always come back once it really dries with a nice round brush. And if you want to be able to show some dark spots where there might be a crack in that old wood wall where the joints are, well, you can get nice deep dark color and come back in and pick up where some of those old cracks might be. And also at that time, get you some darks and get out of that mid-tone value range and let it show just what is really there. Okay, that's how you do those particular. Pat it down a little bit. And I like to pat my color down a little bit. I don't mind if I have to put another layer on it. That's fine with me. I just like to be able to not put too much dark on it at one particular time so that I make a mistake and not be able to go get the dark off. It's hard to take it off, although that's another upcoming video. How do you correct something? It's just as important to know how to correct it as it is to how to paint it. Because if you don't think you can make mistakes, guess what? Okay, let's take some of that dark out of there. Okay, how deep and dark, how rotten could that board be where the joint is? Maybe it's, there we go. There we go. Now we start getting that transition between field darks and real lights, and you wind up with this kind of wall. Okay, which is what you're looking for when you are painting at this scale. When you're painting something where you have enough width to be able to get that texture on it. Okay, that's it for this particular video. We'll be looking for you next video, which will be painting this nice crusty old rusted roof. Here we are. Okay, thank you, be safe, and we'll see you soon.